Hey guys, and welcome back to Beer Fueled Fantasy Football. We've got the whole crew here. We're ready for a preview of Week 13. We've got some Kareem Hunt news to discuss. It's going to be a busy episode. I hope you guys are strapped in and ready. Have your beers cracked and ready to go with us. Dan,
Hold on.
Perfect. Dan Third to my right, cracking his beer.
At 30 BFF, what's up, guys?
Christopher Hopper down in St. Louis.
Cracking his beer at BFF with 2 P's. How's it going, guys?
And are you drinking the same thing we are?
Yes.
Yeah, I got the Stone.
Fantastic. So we all got the same thing. I am at Nick Sparts. I'm not going to give you the full intro today. We've got a lot to get through. I am going to say something, though, for those of you following at Beer Fueled Fantasy Football on YouTube, coming in to ask questions during the episode. We're going to try to make it more lightning round style. We have no more bye weeks. We have no more filler room. We've got some big news to talk about today. So questions that you guys are asking, I want them between your two players you are debating between the most, and we'll make the call. And instead of doing a full debate, it's going to be one of us just quick giving you the answer, okay?
Yeah, we're fine for 3, but don't be crazy, please.
Yeah, if you really need 3, we'll let you do it. But try to keep it limited. We got 15 games to get through and some big breaking news. So we don't want this to be a 2-hour episode. As always, Beer Fueled FF, Twitter, Instagram, and Untapped, and that's where I'm leaving it. We're going to get to the beer preview here before we get through all the news, all the game previews, let you know who's in or out this week, and make sure you guys are ready to win Week 13. It's the last week before most people, before the playoffs start. And on today's episode, Dan was nice enough to provide Sanctimonious IPA by Stone Brewing Company. I put Stone Brewing IPA. Stone Brewing hasn't been on the show for a while. We brought him back in for a visit. It's a 7% IPA, Amarillo Simcoe hops that is Sanctimonious IPA. We'll give you a full review once we're through previewing the noon games.
Got a dose of my bullshit. Can you read what series it's from, please? Because this is my favorite series ever. It's on the blue band on the bottom.
Blue band on the bottom. Hop Worship series. I like that.
I do too. Hop Worship is good.
All right.
With 1P.
So let's go ahead and jump into news. We've got a lot to talk about today. News. And starting with bad news. Oh, and if you're listening to this podcast right now, before we even get to the news, go pick up Spencer Ware. Like, don't even wait the next 30 seconds to hear what we're going to say.
Yeah, Nick jumped on it before I could.
I actually, funny story, I picked him up an hour before the news broke.
Did you?
Yeah, I picked him up as just a waiver. I dropped Maurice Harris. I'm like, I just want to grab a back just in case something happens to Kareem Hunt this weekend.
Lucky.
And then the news broke, and I felt like a psychic. So Kareem Hunt, the video from his altercation that occurred back in February at a Cleveland hotel with a 19-year-old woman got released by TMZ. It's from 2 angles, security footage from the hotel. Effectively, it shows him, he gets shoved by this woman after a verbal altercation. Then he goes after her. His friends try to hold him back a couple times. He keeps trying to go after her, and then finally he shoves one of his friends into her. She falls, hits her head, and then he kind of walks by and gives her a kick before leaving. Was the kind of quick summary of what happened. I would watch the video if you want to see it.
Yeah, just, caution, because it's, douchebag alert.
Yeah, it is douchebag alert. It's not quite what Ray writes bad, but still not good.
Yeah, and, I mean, it's public. Everyone's talking about it. NFL's going to have to do something. Our expectation seems to be, from the 3 of us, he's going to go on the commissioner's exempt list. He could very well be done for the season.
I'm assuming he will. The Chiefs did send him home. So the Chiefs are doing their part to do the right thing, because we fully expect NFL to drag their feet through this. They should do their due diligence as they should, as any business should. But the Chiefs did the right thing, sent him home. I highly doubt he plays this week. I don't think he plays for the rest of the season, though. Maybe playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's probably commissioner's exempt list. They'll do what they did to Adrian Peterson. And then the punishment will come next year for the official suspension.
Yep. Hopper, any thoughts?
No, I think you guys are spot on. There's nothing else to talk about here. It's going to be commissioner's exempt list. Initial suspension next year. My guess would be somewhere between 6 and 10 games. Most likely, I'm shooting for 8.
You're going right down the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think 6 is the minimum he's going to get. A couple other notes. Ware should not be too much of a downgrade. We'll talk about that when we get to the game preview. I have a bunch of notes about how the Raiders defense is. It's not very good. Ware is going to be a start this week if Hunt isn't going. And then if you're in a deeper league as well, Damon Williams is also worth a pickup.
Yep.
Because Ware has gotten banged up and hurt before too.
All right, before the next news segment, Nick, asked by Jared, Curtis Samuel or Cortland Sutton?
Jared Samuel or Cortland Sutton?
I'm pretty sure Samuel's going to play.
With Funchess going, give me Sutton.
I agree. All right, moving on.
All right, up next, we've got Mike Garofalo reports Chase Daniel will start this week against the Giants. Trubisky may be active, but it's doubtful.
Yeah, he hasn't. I don't think he's throwing this week at all either. I don't know if you can confirm that, Hopper, or not. You follow the Bears a little bit more than we do.
He was limited in practice all week. I didn't see specifics as far as if he'd thrown or not, but he was limited, which tells me he's getting close. But I think out of abundance of caution, they're going to hold him out. Giants are not a fantastic team, so I think it's another situation where you make sure he's good and just run Chase Daniel out another week.
Yeah, from a fantasy standpoint, though, not great news. The Giants' pass defense is better than their run defense.
More on that later.
So probably lean more on Hopper start of the week, Howard and Cohen this week.
Yeah, that's another reason I love Jordan Howard this week.
All right. What might derail the Gus bus here is Ravens are considering adding Kenneth Dixon to the active roster prior to Week 13 against the Falcons.
Well, potentially Noah Collins. Gus Edwards, I don't know if he was a full participant this week or today or not, but he's been banged up this week too.
He and Collins are both questionable.
Yeah, so it's more of a precautionary thing that I think that he's going to affect Gus Bus if Bus is able to play.
All right. In last night's game, Cole Beasley suffered a sprained foot against the Saints. It was in his play that basically ended the game when he stretched for the first down.
Yeah, because that's the reason why the game was fucking horseshit last night.
We'll get to that in a moment.
We'll do one quick question there. Hopper, how do you feel about Ebron this weekend?
How do I feel about Ebron this weekend? I'm a fan of Ebron. I'll cover him. I actually have the Colts game. So I'll cover him a little bit more, but let's just say his last time out against Jacksonville, he completely balled out, and they are not good in the red zone against tight ends, but more on that later.
No, second half of the season, Jacksonville's been straight up bad against tight ends.
Yes.
The first game, or my first game in the preview, the second one in, so we're close.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. Rams activated cornerback Aqib Talib off from injured reserve. Normally, we wouldn't talk about this type of move, but their defense has gotten so bad since he got off the field that it should really help to have him back in bolstering that secondary.
Yeah, they were not fantastic before he got hurt, but they were okay. And after he got hurt, it just all went to crap. I think Peters benefits and that secondary benefits from this a decent amount.
Yeah, it at least kind of takes one side of the field away, and they can give Peters some safety help because he needs it. And then one of our favorite topics is players declaring for the NFL draft. We've got two tight ends that declared today. Noah Fant, tight end from Iowa, he's 21 years old, and Dax Raymond, tight end, Utah State, 23. Both, Fant has a ton of buzz. He's expected to just kill the combine. Raymond's been also getting some buzz as of late, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll give you more information once we get to the off-season program, but look out for that. Those are two more names to add if you're especially in a sort of deep two tight end or tight end premium league, which we are.
Before we jump to the next game, Jimmy asked another question, Jordan Howard or Josh Adams full PPR. I'm going to field this one. I like Josh Adams a lot more this week as Washington's run defense is kind of taking a stumble there.
Yep. My only concern is Darren Sproles is likely to go.
I have a question.
Asking for a friend?
Yeah, draft compensation on Julian Edelman trade in Dynasty. I know you said no Dynasty questions, but
second round pick, depending on
accepting it. I got that.
All right, one more before we jump. Project Badass, Watson or Luck? Watson or Luck, Nick?
I think it's Watson, but man, how the hell do you sit Luck right now?
I'm not sitting Luck against Jacksonville, who may not have Jalen Ramsey, who Luck went off against last week.
All right, let's talk about what happened in last night's game.
What the hell happened?
So Hopper, we called the fact that the Cowboys were going to cover correct, but holy hell, 23 total points.
Good call, because I felt the same way.
So Cowboys win this one 13-10. The Cowboys had all their points before halftime. This game was awful.
It didn't even reach the halfway point for the over-under at 52. That's how bad it was.
This was a very, very disappointing game. Starting with the Saints side, with Drew Brees being the leader of the Ring of Disappointment. 127 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. What the hell is going on?
I think this is more of a throwaway game. Road Brees showed up, and Dallas's defense is nothing to scoff at anymore.
With the Drew Brees, Michael Thomas stack in a dynasty league that I need to win in, I'm not a happy person right now.
Yeah, Hopper may have bounced out of the playoffs.
I have that stack in multiple places. I feel your pain, buddy.
I have Kamara and Michael Thomas stacks in a few spots that
On
killed
the
me.
bright side, I have Scott Fish and I'm on bye.
Oh, good time to get a bye.
Yeah, you dodged a bullet.
I did.
Kamara saved his day with 8 receptions if you're in a full-point PPR league, managed 72 total yards and 19 touches. You'll take it, considering how bad almost everyone else did in this game.
Yeah.
If you started Ingram, on the other hand,
Raise your elbow if you started Ingram.
9 touches, 28 yards.
Gross.
Yeah.
Michael Thomas had 8 of the 14 wide receiver targets, caught 5 for 40 yards. He had some penalties. That doesn't really help you at all, unfortunately.
Drops. There were some
drops.
There are some very questionable drops from the Saints receiving corner. Brees seemed slightly off with the offensive line not as dominant.
Yeah, he seemed like he was not putting it where he in as accurately as he normally does. Just a disappointing game for him overall as well. Kirkwood caught 1 of 3 for the only touchdown on the day. Drake had 1 target. It was inside the 5-yard line, and he dropped it.
He had dropped one earlier in the game too.
I thought he only had 1 target.
Unless that was that one target.
I think it was the 1 target. Was the one you're thinking of.
Okay.
Primary receiving tight end continues to be Dan Arnold. He caught both his targets for 20 yards, which was all the receiving production for tight ends in this game. So he continues to be a thing. I like him as a deep dynasty stash because he's a move tight end, which Breeze loves.
He's an receiver.
Yep. Defense, the only bright note for the Saints. 7 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, 4 straight solid performances. I may start them next week against Tampa Bay, who is very turnover prone.
I definitely would. It's a good call, especially if it's in Dallas. I think it is.
You mean in New Orleans?
No, I'm saying that the Saints defense. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm holding us up.
On to the Cowboys side, where Dak had a solid NFL day, but it was a pretty unspectacular fantasy game. He was 24-28 for 248 yards and a touchdown. Did have a fumble, had 2 nice runs to pick up first downs for 22 total rushing yards. But he really needed that second touchdown to have a startable day, but still better than Breeze.
Yeah.
Zeke did Zeke things. 29 touches. Not overly efficient. Managed to eke out 136 yards on him. Got a touchdown on a nice catch and run. So, I mean, he gave you enough. It wasn't a lot of big plays for him. He only had a couple really nice runs, but it was enough to get you done for a fantasy aspect.
This is probably his worst matchup left on the season for him. So this is a good game in terms of
Eagles' run defense wasn't scaring me anymore. So this was the worst.
This is probably the worst.
Passing game, it was basically Cooper and Gallup and nobody else. Which, by the way, Gallup had a very, very nice start to this game.
Fuck Dak missing him wide open on an easy walk.
Oh, that would have been an easy touchdown. 15 of the 22 targets this game went to either Cooper or Gallup. Between all receivers and tight ends. Cooper caught all 8, 75 yards. He had a bad fumble on a play that he seemed like he just didn't realize he wasn't down.
It was a weird play.
And then Gallup was very impressive, especially on that first drive where he had he had the nice comeback route and then the go route that he just beat his guy on. The rest of the passing game, none are ownable. Beasley, Brown, Jarwin, and Schultz combined for 7 targets.
Yeah.
Defense held the Saints to 10 points, got 2 sacks and a fumble. They've overperformed. They've been significantly better than we thought coming into the season.
Yes, they've continued to get better each week. I think they got a decent schedule moving forward too. If I remember,
not a bad team to try to match up and pair matchups with.
Yep.
All right, that's all I got on that. Before we get to all the game recaps, let's quick talk about some guys that are in and out. Starting with running backs. Darren Sproles is expected to finally make his return from a Week 1 hamstring injury.
About time. He was on the shelf for a while. I don't know. That doesn't hurt Josh Adams any. It's more Corey Clement, though.
Yeah, my only concern is Adams was seeing some passing game work, and that may limit that a little bit.
Yeah.
Biggest news, though, wide receiver A.J. Green is back from his toe injury. Unfortunately, Andy Dalton is not.
Thank God. At least they have Green back to help take coverage off of Boyd.
Yep. I think you probably have to start Green. It's just not going to – it's going to be very nerve-wracking.
Yep.
Hilton was listed as questionable this week. He was pulled from the injury report. He is good to go.
Perfect.
And may not catch Ramsey.
Even better.
Doug Baldwin is off the injury report. He's good to go.
Yay.
Good.
Curtis Samuel with the hamstring is good to go.
Good matchup.
And then Equimania St. Brown is good to go.
Okay. I mean, he's been getting more work than MVS, so.
Yeah, if you're looking for a second receiver in Green Bay, I think it's him.
As it should.
Or Cobb's back, apparently.
Yep. Tight end Eric Ebron, fine from his back injuries off the injury report.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And then he'll be playing with a giant fucking thing on his hand, but Jimmy Graham's going to go.
Yeah.
The splint again?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but he got the all good today. Matt Bryant's going to go this week as well.
Oh, good.
Before we move to outs, Hopper, pick one of the three. He must have missed a call. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, or Gus Edwards in a standard league.
Pick one.
Pick one.
Out of Chubb, Eckler, and Edwards?
Yes.
I really like Austin Eckler. After I kind of took a look at the matchup and what Denver was doing against running backs, so more on that later. But Gus Edwards also, but you kind of want to wait to hear about the ankle there.
And I don't think you can sit Nick Chubb. He's been pretty good since the Hugh Jackson firing. So,
all right, for outs, you got running back Melvin Gordon with the knee, Kerryon Johnson with the knee. Any major takeaways from these two?
For Melvin Gordon and Kerryon Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
For the Lions, start your theoretics in any form of PPR.
Yep.
And LeGarrette Blunt in standard.
LeGarrette Blunt in standard, yes. For Melvin Gordon, more on that later, but there is a reason that I like Austin Eckler a lot this week.
For wide receivers,
sorry, I said Broncos earlier. It's the Steelers, but just I got some nuggets coming up later.
I was gonna say I thought the Browns had the Steelers, or the Broncos, but now I just flipped that up. So Browns have the Broncos.
Browns have the Texans.
Texans, that's what it is. Who is that?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like Chubb this week. The Bengals have the Broncos, and the Ravens have the Falcons. So it's actually it may be more Edwards, but the ankle concerns me. So for right now, it's Eckler. But if Edwards goes,
Okay.
Edwards.
Sounds good.
All right, Sammy Watkins with the foot is not gonna go.
No.
Yeah, we mentioned that earlier. Now, granted, I don't remember who it was on.
The question was Traquan or Sammy Watkins. We said wait on Sammy, so hopefully you waited on Sammy because now you can go pick up somebody instead.
Yeah.
Right, because they're going to be better than either of them. I think you said they had MVS also.
Yeah, I would rather start MVS than either a zero from Traquan or an out Sammy Watkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Deshaun Jackson is not going to go with his thumb injury.
Chris Godwin, Adam Humphries.
Shouldn't affect Humphries at all, but it should definitely affect Godwin.
Definitely going to affect Godwin more.
Yeah. I mean, target volume still is, so I mean, that's going to get dispersed.
Yep.
Marquise Goodwin is not going to go for personal reasons.
Dante Pettis and all of the Dante Pettis. More on that later, too.
It is a tough matchup against the Seahawks, though.
They get killed by speed.
Okay. And then Pierre Garçon with the knee also plays into the Dante Pettis thing.
Yeah, no. All the Dante Pettis.
Evan Ingram is not going to go hamstring.
Rhett Edelson?
Red Ellis? They're pretty good against tight ends.
And I think they probably keep him into block a lot.
Wide receivers is really their only fantasy weakness.
All right.
So more Shepard, I'd say.
Before we move to check back Sunday, I'm going to Phil Pavon's question of Higbee or Lacuse. I'm going to go with
Your start of the week.
My start of the week, Lacuse. Deep start of the week. My biggest reason is because of just potential chance of a better path to targets for Lacuse over Higbee. Higbee's got to still compete with Everett. He doesn't get a lot of work in the passing game. Lacoste, thank you.
Yeah, and then in Higbee, as we talked about this on Wednesday's episode, tends to get more between the 20s, whereas Everett's more the red zone guy.
Very much an Ebert Doyle situation, I think.
Yes.
Before Doyle got hurt.
All right, check back Sundays. Sam Darnold foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not starting Josh McCown. I don't know that I like anything about the Jets.
Yeah, I have a few wrinkles, but it's not very pretty when I get to that game. Mitchell Trubisky, shoulder, doubtful.
Chase Daniel again. That is just better for the running backs, personally. Taylor Gabriel got targeted by him a lot, but I expect this to be more of a run first win it with defense game.
And a kind of permanent fixture on the list for the last couple of weeks, Joe Flacco, hip, doubtful.
He's not going.
I don't think he plays.
One more week.
Yeah, one more week.
And then it gets fucking stupid.
Marlon Mack, and I put in quotes upper body injury. It's a concussion, but I like making fun of the NHL's injury system.
He returned to practice, so I think he'll be
Yeah,
I think he'll be back.
think he'll be cleared.
okay.
Keep an eye on Sleeper, Roto World, whatever you guys use for your news. I expect he's cleared tomorrow.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards' ankle.
Just mention that. I think he goes probably, but yeah, we'll see.
Any concerns? If he's active, are you worried at all about it being a lingering issue, or
No, not with the room he's had running the way it's opened up. Even if it does hamper him a little bit, he's still really solid.
Yep.
And then on a similar note, Alex Collins with the foot.
I think
Yeah.
that's
I don't know that I care unless Edwards isn't playing.
All right, on to the wide receivers, and we've got a lot of them. Stephon Diggs, knee questionable, is expected to play,
good.
Okay.
We need him.
but he may be wearing a brace.
He'll be all right.
Kiki Kuti, hamstring.
Again?
Yep.
It's been nagging him, so.
I mean, he keeps re-injuring the same one, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe they should just let him sit with like the trade for Thomas. I don't know why they're trying to rush him back.
They just need to shut him down and let Thomas do his thing. I wouldn't be surprised if they did try to rust him.
Yeah, I'm sitting him though.
Devin Funchess back. Coach said if the probable tag was still here, he would be probable.
Then I expect him to play.
Tyrell Williams quad.
Oof.
Even if he does go, I'm not interested.
Especially for a speedy guy. Yeah.
Any interest in Mike Williams if he doesn't go?
No.
No, because the volume still hasn't been there.
That and the Steelers are really good against wide receivers that aren't. Yeah, more on that later.
Randall Cobb hamstring.
I'm vaguely interested in that if he does play, which he's expected to. But just because I think it gives them a different wrinkle that they haven't really had with MVS and ESP catching passes. I think Rodgers needs a safety net.
Yep. All right. What might make a bad situation for the Lions even worse? Bruce Ellington back injury.
You can never stay healthy.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the same one that he was dealing with during with the Bears too, or against the Bears rather.
I was gonna say I don't think Bruce Ellington ever played for the Bears.
I'm assuming yes.
Against the Bears.
Yeah,
So
I think
I think he probably plays.
And then we got two Dolphins: Devontae Parker shoulder and Danny Amendola hamstring doubtful.
Amendola for sure not then.
Amendola, no. Parker probably.
Do you care much either way?
No.
No.
Bump to the Bills defense if he doesn't go.
They'll still have a very good pass defense.
And Martavis Bryant knee.
I don't care.
Right. No tight ends. I have a couple defensive notes because they're shadow corners. Jalen Ramsey knee. Xavier Rhodes hamstring. From what I've heard, Rhodes is more likely than Ramsey to play.
Jacksonville's defense it's been a shell of himself, and Indy is the top 5 offense right now. It wouldn't matter for me.
I mean, if he doesn't go, it's a massive bump to Hilton for me because he would have been the one who draws Hilton.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Nick. It is a big bump to Hilton if he does go.
Yeah.
Or doesn't go.
We have a quick question here. Colts defense versus we'll do this for Nick. Colts defense versus the Jags with Kessler and Novernette, or Texans defense against the Browns.
Oh, Colts. Give me the Colts.
Yeah.
Browns offense has looked competent lately. And the Texans do have some weaknesses in their defense, which we'll get to in just a little bit here.
I know we said no long questions, but we haven't had anything else come after this, so we'll try to make this quick here. I know we're not going to do anything long, but here, pick 2, Eckler, Carson, Breida, Spencer if Hunt sits, which he's probably going to. There is a caveat to this: 1.5 or 1.25 PPR, quarter rushing yards, and 0.15 receiving yards. Please answer. It's tough.
Who are you asking?
Just a field. There's a lot of them.
Assuming Hunt doesn't go, it's Carson and Ware.
All right.
Okay, that works.
All right, now we got to go ahead and preview 15 games for you guys, so strap in.
Weekly preview.
Breaking news, Kareem Hunt goes on the commissioner exempt list. So
We know things.
Hey, we called that.
Good.
Yep, not even remotely surprised. All right, we already discussed Hunt enough, though.
Yes.
Dan, Bears versus Giants. We do not have a line due to the Trubisky-Daniel issue. When I checked, there may be one now. I would guess 45 and Bears by 8.
There's probably not going to be a line. If there is, it'll be a second half line. Anyways, Giants are pretty good against quarterbacks this season. They've only given up 15 passing touchdowns, and they've had 10 interceptions in 11 games. I'm not playing Chase Daniels just because there's no real track record for him. So you're just mainly taking a gamble in what is a very important week for most people. As for the running game here, is where you can beat the Giants. However, there is no real running back here I trust, though. Howard saw 7 carries last week, which has been the lowest of the season. He hasn't had 20 since week 8. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games. It's had 4 during that same 3. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games and has only had 4 total targets in the passing game during that same 3-game span. He hasn't eclipsed over 4 yards per carry in a game since week 6. But because of Chase Daniels being in, he is a decent flex option. I also believe the Giants haven't given up a lot of rushing touchdowns.
I mean, they gave up three games with 3 straight here before this. Last
then
week.
I must have. I probably read the wrong thing here. I was a little drunk last night.
Oh, no, they gave one to Adams last week, too, so it's 4 in a row.
Yeah, 4 in a row. As for Cohen here, the passing floor has been there for him. 20 targets over his last 3 games. He has 16 catches on those targets. Problem is he's only totaled 56 rushing yards during that same 3-game span on just 17 carries. I would rather go Cohen for the safer floor, but Howard's got the touchdown upside, which is what mainly saves his day. So they're both flex options for me.
And this could definitely turn into a grind game for Howard.
I fully expect it to be a grind game. We'll see how that shapes out. As for the receivers here, when you haven't given up a lot of passing touchdowns, you can guess the wide receivers haven't done much. The Giants have given up the second fewest wide receiver touchdowns this season with just 8. And per player profiler, Robinson is slated to see Janoris Jenkins, who they rank as the 132nd ranked cornerback. So good matchup for Robinson here. He's got upside with this. Gabriel led the team in targets last week, with Daniel starting with 8. But that may have been because they wanted to avoid Slay more so than that. So I like Robinson as a flex play this week with some decent upside, and Gabriel has got the same deepish league flex play to him, and I'm not really playing Miller because of it, because of the lack of touchdown upside. Burton faces a Giants defense has given up just two tight end touchdowns all season. And since his breakout game, he hasn't eclipsed 50 receiving yards, and he's had just 1 touchdown during that span.
Yeah, it wasn't a breakout; it was a mirage.
Yeah, he still has some decent upside, and just given the tight end landscape, but it's not a good matchup for you. And then you're gonna start the defense as you should here. The Bears, they get Peyton Manning, who's taking at least 1 sack in every game.
They get Peyton
or Eli Manning. Well, maybe the same. I don't know who's better. At least 1 sack in every game this season. That's Eli Manning, and they've had 4 more sacks. He's taken 4 more sacks 6 times this year.
I'm taking the over.
Yeah, I'm saying 8.
It's definitely going to be an over.
It'll be an over 4. As for the Giants here, I'm only starting Barkley and Odell. Both should have their ceiling lowered. Volume should protect Barkley from a complete dud. Odell does have some of that risk. Kyle Fuller is player profiler's 13th ranked corner. He should be getting mostly Odell in this matchup. And then this was before the Ingram news, but I wouldn't play him anyways. So Bears have been the best team against Titans over the past 4 weeks. So a little shade on the Red Elliston if you decide to play him. And Shepard's been way too inconsistent to trust. He's been a bit of a bust this year. And the defense for the Giants, this could be a trap game if you want to get cute trying to play him against Chase Daniels. He didn't throw an interception last week, but he did take 4 sacks.
All right. Reps puts a bell on that game. Let's go ahead and go to Colts v. Jaguars. Colts are favored by 4 on the road, 47-point over-under. Hopper, how many starters we got in this game?
All right, let's start with the Colts. Andrew Luck, you got 8 straight games of 3 or more touchdowns, 11 to 12 multi-touchdown games. Jacksonville has allowed multiple touchdowns in 3 of 4. You're starting him, no question about that. Marlon Mack practice, he should be back and ready to play. Jacksonville's fantastic against the run, and he had just 29 yards rushing against them last time out. He's kind of in that mirrors back into screamer category for me this week. I know that he's been really, really good. Jacksonville's not been as good down the stretch, but it is still a good run defense. So I don't love that.
Yep.
T.Y. Hilton falls to wide receiver 2 status this week with Ramsey, but I said likely going, but now it sounds like that's more in question. If Ramsey does not go, Hilton bumps up for me. Jacksonville's allowed a 15-point wide receiver in each of the last 2 weeks. They're merely league average against wide receivers over the last 5 weeks. So to me, in a vacuum, that's kind of a floor game. But if Ramsey doesn't go, then I have no reserves about T.Y. Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
And then Eric Ebron is a must start to me. There's no Doyle. Jacksonville allowed 2 touchdowns and 69 yards to him his last time out. Allowed 7 touchdowns on the year to tight ends, which is tied for 3rd worst with Cincinnati, Cincinnati and New England.
Yep, and also no Mo Alley Cox either.
Yep. So it's
just Jesus.
Ebron's going to see 95% of snaps.
Yep.
Let's see 100. You should see 100.
And the Colts defense. This is one of the reasons why I highlighted them when we were talking about defenses to carry you through the playoffs or to the playoffs. They've got a Cody Kessler-led Jaguars team with no Leonard Fournette. This is a juicy matchup for them.
Yep.
On to the Jaguars. Cody Kessler, don't get cute. There's no reason to. He had 1 300-yard game and 1 multi-touchdown game as a Brown starter the year that he did get to start a little bit, so don't get cute with that. Carlos Hyde, TJ Yeldon. Indy still hasn't allowed a 100-yard rusher on the year. They're allowing under 4 yards a carry to runners. However, they are allowing 58 yards a game to receiving backs. This points to TJ Yeldon. Because of this, he's a back-end running back, too. Hyde's a mere kind of emergency streamer for me if you need somebody that may still be out there. But TJ Yeldon's the guy I want in this matchup because it does play more towards receiving backs, and that's what he is. Dante Moncrief's the only wide receiver I would consider. Kessler was able to support 4 wide receiver 2 or better weeks for Terrell Pryor in his 6 starts. And Moncrief did hang 15 on his former team the last time they played. So that's okay. And then ASJ is actually what I really like this week. It's my favorite start on this team.
Isn't ASJ on IR?
Yeah, he is.
Isn't he? I thought it looked last week and he had targets. If not, it's O'Shaughnessy.
It's O'Shaughnessy. I'm pretty sure AHA is still on IR. Nick, you can look.
Yeah, go ahead and look. I'm just going to go through the tight end stats here. That's what's important. Replace ASJ with whoever's starting for the Jags, basically. Barnard never had a game below 55 yards when Kessler was Cleveland's starter. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was put on IR on October 8th, so he would not be eligible to return.
I don't know what the hell I read in a box score then. Anyway, James O'Shaughnessy. Replace ASJ with James O'Shaughnessy. He's my start this week, though, because of what Barnage did with Cody Kessler. 55 yards when Kessler was Cleveland's starter in every game Kessler started. He's going to target the tight end. And tight ends with over 5 targets against this Jacksonville defense, 56.7 yards and 3 touchdowns over 8 games. 4 of those, the tight ends have gone over 70 yards.
I'm assuming you're saying against the Colts defense, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
All right. Anything else to add there?
Yep. Reading my notes, not normally good, especially when I rush through them.
All right, and I'm assuming Jags defense is a hell no against Andrew Luck?
Yes.
All right.
We have a couple questions here. I'm going to field the first one here. Green Bay's defense versus Arizona or Buffalo's defense versus Miami. I'm taking the upside swing of Green Bay's defense versus Arizona.
I'm going Buffalo's.
Okay. I like them both.
I'm following Vegas and going with Green Bay.
And then just one more quick here. Woods or T.Y. Hilton, league scoring 1.25 PPR leagues and 15.15 receiving yards. Hilton versus Woods. We'll with Nick on this one. Woods should not see Slay. Should be more Cooks.
It's based on Ramsey. If Ramsey's out, give me Hilton. If Ramsey's in, give me Woods.
Okay. Moving on. We can go.
Up next is Browns going into Houston to play the Texans. Texans are 5.5-point home favorites, 48-point over/under. From the Browns side, Mayfield's kind of an interesting spot here. On paper, the Texans are a tough matchup, allowing just 249 passing yards and 1.5 touchdowns per game. They're 7th in points to opposing quarterbacks, though, but they've had the easiest schedule in the league through 11 weeks facing the following quarterbacks: Tom Brady, Blaine Gabbert, Eli Manning, Andrew Luck, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen / Nathan Peterman, Blake Bortles / Cody Kessler, Brock Osweiler, Alex Smith / Colt McCoy, and Marcus Mariota. So about 3 good names in there. It's been real easy for them. I like Mayfield as a streaming option. He's had 3 straight games with a floor of 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I think he can match it again this week in a game with, I expect, a decent amount of scoring. Chubb's been awesome for you, but this matchup is super tough. Texans are allowing 3.42 yards per carry to opposing running backs, 10 total touchdowns to running backs on the season. He's going to be a running back 2 on volume alone. I don't think he's a running back 1 for you this week. You may be able to set a lineup where he is not in it. For receivers, I actually would rather start Callaway than Jarvis Landry this week. Callaway's led the receiver team in receiving yards in 4 straight games, has 3 touchdowns to Landry's 2 on the season, and 2 of Callaway's have come in the last 4 weeks since this offense started making its change and Mayfield started becoming a better starting quarterback. So Callaway for me is a low wide receiver play, and Landry is kicked off a cliff, as Hopper liked to put it.
Yes, he is.
Texans are an above-average wide receiver defense, but similar to the quarterback point, their slate of receivers has been pretty mediocre for the majority of the season. Njoku was Dan's start of the week, faces a Texans defense that's given up an average of 67 yards a game to opposing tight ends. A touchdown has been scored against them in 3 straight games. They're bottom 5 against the position, so it's a nice matchup for Njoku, who should keep his hot streak going. And the Browns defense, unfortunately, though, not quite good enough to start. Watson's been sacked 37 times this year, but the Browns actually don't get a lot of sacks, and they give up just enough points where I'm hesitant to start him. There's so many good matchups this week, I'm not considering them. For the Texans side, Browns have been a below-average pass defense the last 5 games. Watson's a solid start here. Average performance against the Browns over the last 5 is 316 yards and 2 touchdowns, so Watson is a top 6 play for me this week. For Browns, though, running backs is by far their biggest weakness. Lamar Miller was my start of the week. He can be treated as a mid to high RB2 in a nice matchup. Browns are giving up 160 plus total yards per game to opposing running backs and 13 total touchdowns on the season so far.
Oof.
Average wide receiver performance against the Browns is 85 yards and 0.72 touchdowns against the Browns. So Hopkins should be started as usual top 6 to 8 play. He just needs to barely beat the average performance to finish with 100 yards and a touchdown, which I think he is capable of doing. For secondary receiver options, I mentioned I like Thomas over Kuti, and that's even if he goes, though. I consider both wide receiver 3s, but I think Thomas has a much higher ceiling with him being a red zone weapon. Last week, Kuti only had 2 targets as well, which is a big concern, possibly because he was hampered with a hamstring.
Yep.
Don't consider anyone in the three-headed tight end monster, and then defense is set and forget at this point. 2+ sacks and at least 1 turnover in 8 straight games.
Oof.
Cardinals versus the Packers. Packers are favored by 14. It's a 44.5 point over-under. Dan, I think you can make this one fast.
Yeah, so David Johnson is still, I guess you consider an auto start, just given what your draft capital is and the volume that he gets. He just isn't the clear RB1 that he's been and what we drafted him to be. He's had 10 total touchdowns running backs this season, gives David Johnson some upside. That's what the Packers have given up. Fitz has been more Eldrick Robinson than a wide receiver 1 over his past 2 games, scoring 3 touchdowns on just 4 receptions. Still, the Packers' secondary and defense isn't nearly as good as the Chargers, so even during garbage time, Fitz should see better targets. Fitz is a wide receiver 3 flex play with maybe some upside. Kurt has more production over these past 2 games over Fitzgerald, and he is a big play guy, so there is some upside in what could be a boom bust with some insulated value or with some insulated floor. Nobody else is startable. Packers, not a great game. Not a great matchup for Rodgers, but given the Packers are on their playoff lifeline, I just have a feeling that Rodgers is going to have a Rodgers type of game, even in what's considered a bad matchup. Cardinals have given up the 4th lowest points per game to quarterbacks this season.
But we saw what Rivers just did to him.
We saw what Rivers just did, and like I said, Rodgers, lifeline, everything else, I think you just throw him out there. The other Aaron, who's sharing a birthday with Rodgers on, I think, their game this Sunday, he's an easy auto start for me. RB4 and half-point PPR leagues over the past 3 weeks. He's averaging 24 points per game. 5 total touchdowns during that span with an increased passing work to boost his floor. And the Chargers have given up a league high 16 touchdowns to running backs on the ground, nearly 145 yards per game at a 4.5 yards per carry clip. Devontae Adams is also considered an auto start, and all their Packer receivers really worth given the depth and what we've seen from this. Cobb comes back and kind of clutter and mutter that whole receiving core. I want to wait and see before I want to try to even consider playing it right before the playoffs start. Graham has broken his thumb, is still in a slint. Not a lot of other names you can trust. You can try to play him at your own risk. I think if you can avoid, I would. The defense for Green Bay isn't great, but Josh Rosen has thrown an interception, at least one interception in his last 6 games, 10 total during that span. Also, during that 6-game span, he's taken 3.5 sacks. We've seen Green Bay have a chance to get to the quarterback. I love their defense as an upside play this week. And that's that.
All right, and then we get up next to the Bills versus Dolphins game. Dolphins favored by 4. It's 40-point over-under, and it is the Y game per Hopper.
Yeah, this is definitely the Y game. As in, why is this a thing? We'll start with the Bills, though. Josh Allen's my sneaky 2-quarterback super flex. Oh my God, I need somebody league start of the week. Miami has held just 1 quarterback in the last 6 weeks under 15 points. Mitch Trubisky showed you can run at a decent clip against the Dolphins, and Allen has 4 rush touchdowns in his last 6 games started, so I think he'll be all right for you, at least in that kind of mid-quarterback 2 range, if not a little higher. So start of the week, but just 2 quarterback and superflex. Don't run out, start him and redraft.
No.
LaShawn McCoy was Nick's start of the week, I believe. I didn't actually go back and look.
It was.
Okay. Miami's given up 6 100-yard rushing games on the season. With Allen back, it takes the pressure off of McCoy to carry the load. He's running back 2 startable. I don't trust any wide receivers or tight ends at this point. I don't care how bad the Dolphins are against wide receiver 2s. I'm not starting anything that's a pass catcher here. And their defense for Buffalo has played incredibly well. They get a low-powered offense led by Ryan Tannehill. I'm absolutely looking at starting their defense. That's all I got on the Bills.
All right.
Moving on to the Dolphins. Tannehill is an absolutely not. Buffalo has allowed only Tom Brady and Andrew Luck into double digits against them over the last 7 weeks. Bortles, McCown, Trubisky, Watson, Mariota all failed to hit that mark. And I know those aren't necessarily great names, but those are guys that, well, outside of McCown and Bortles, but Trubisky, Watson, Mariota are guys that normally give you 10 to 15 points a week
As a floor.
Yeah.
as a floor. As for the running backs, Kenyon Drake is a running back 2 to me, where Gore's more of a flex play. Buffalo's allowed 15 or more points in 4 of the last 5 games, and they've given up 6 touchdowns in that time frame. Drake leads the team with 4 Dolphins touchdowns, which means he's likely to get that. And those 4 backs to break 15, they're solid, but they're not exactly elite either. They're Marlon Mack, James White, Jordan Howard, Leonard Fournette. So, I mean, 3 of those guys you would consider maybe a tier above Drake, but not fantastic world beaters.
Mm-hmm.
The Dolphins are another team void of a wide receiver, and that I don't really want to trust anyone, although I am fighting my urge to recommend Kenny is still playing.
I believe so. I've not heard anything that he's not.
Yeah, so I'm fighting my urge to recommend Kenny Stills because of the injury concerns and because the Bills have allowed double-digit games to Hopkins, Hilton, Edelman, and Westbrook, so there's some speed to that, which plays into Stills' wheelhouse. But I don't think Miami's going to throw him up enough to make any of these guys necessarily relevant. Stills is just more of a, I need somebody type of throw. And then don't get you with the cute with the tight end. The defense is streamable just because it is the Bills' offense.
Yeah, and it's a 40-point over-under.
Yeah, so both defenses are fine.
All right, let's get to the highest over-under game of the week after we got through that mess. We got the Panthers going into Tampa to play the Buccaneers. Panthers favored by 3.5 on the road. It's a 54.5-point over-under.
Wow, it's the highest.
Rams get Detroit, and the Chiefs get Raiders. So that's why it's a lower scoring week.
All right, so for me, Cam and CMC are, of course, auto starts for me against this bad Bucs defense. I love DJ Moore, even with Funchess and Samuel playing as a great wide receiver 2 play. We've seen the change in guard for the new wide receiver 1 in Carolina. Tampa Bay has given up 274 passing yards per game, 6th most in the league. They've given up the 15th most rushing yards per game at 117, with the second highest points allowed at 30.7. Wide receivers have scored 17 touchdowns against the Bucs this season, which is the second most. So Funchess even had some upside to him because he's been more of a red zone-ish. He's got the red zone built to him. I don't know how much he gets using that anymore, but him and Samuel both have some flex value if they both play. It looks like Samuel for sure will. Greg Olsen hasn't seen much work, but this is a good match for him. Tampa Bay is giving up the 4th most points to tight ends this season per game. You're likely not going to find a better replacement on waivers. So the targets really hasn't been there for Olsen, but the touchdown upside is there for this game. As for the defense, it's a very boom-bust play if you want to take that chance. Bucs have a good offense, but Winston is he's not immune to throwing interceptions and taking sacks. So if you're going to play their defense, play at your own risk. As for the Bucs, Panthers have also been very generous to quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends this season. They're giving up the 6th most to quarterbacks per game, 13th most for wide receivers, and the 2nd most during the past 4 games. They've given up the most points to tight ends, including a league high of 9 touchdowns. Winston is a great streaming option play this week. Mike Evans is an auto start because of his plus matchup, and Adam Humphries is my start of the week. He's been doing great things, even with the change of quarterback into Winston. Everything's been great for him. Godwin's a decent flex play with Jackson not playing. He hasn't found the end zone for a while, but there should be a lot of scoring in this game. Brate is, of course, a great tight end play, top 5 for me this week.
Yeah, the Panthers are awful against tight ends.
9 touchdowns allowed. But Panthers have been a bit better against running backs. They've only given up 96 yards per game to the running backs this season, which is the 6th best. Barber's the low RB2, but volume should So keep him in the RB2 range. He's had 20 touches in back-to-back weeks. And Jacuzzi Roger doesn't really take much away from him either. And for fuck's sake, never play the Tampa Bay defense. And that's that.
All right, that wraps up that game. Up next, we are going on to Broncos-Bengals, and I actually was wrong. Rams and Chiefs are 1 point higher on the over-under. I read something on Reddit that this was the highest, but that was incorrect. Broncos versus Bengals. Broncos favored by 5, 44-point over-under. Hopper, who are we starting on this side with the Case Keenum versus Jeff Driscoll matchup?
Case Keenum, I think, is easily a start this week. Cincinnati's held one quarterback under 15 fantasy points all season. That was Ryan Tannehill. They've allowed 3 or more touchdowns every game but 2. They're just generally not good against the quarterback position. So this is the one time I'll say it. Start your Case Keenums. Running backs have scored over 20 points in 4 of the last 6 weeks, and Phillip Lindsay has been on an absolute tear with at least 1 touchdown in, I think that fraction's 4/5. I hate it when Docs autocorrects things.
Yep.
And so in 4 or 5 and 75 or more yards in that stretch. So Lindsay's been very, very good. He's taken this over from Royce Freeman. Freeman isn't in the conversation anymore. He's seen double-digit touches just once since week 6. So it's all Phillip Lindsay, but you're absolutely starting him. It's a plus matchup for Sanders. He should be considered a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 back end as a team's top target getter. Cortland Sutton isn't seeing high target volume, but he has been efficient-ish in the last couple weeks, clearing 50 yards. So he's an okay flex side play if you need it, but it's kind of lower in there just because I kind of think Denver's going to run away with this one. As for the tight end position, Matt Lacoste got the work over after Hireman went down. It's Dan's start of the week. And I absolutely love this guy. Cincinnati's tied for the 3rd most touchdowns allowed to the tight end, and the Broncos target the tight end in the red zone. That's for Dan's notes. Hireman was 2nd in the league for tight ends in red zone target share and end zone target share. So you got a team that's bad at giving up touchdowns to the tight end, and a tight end that gets looks in the red zone, or a team that targets the tight end in the red zone. Sorry, not specifically Lacoste, but just in general.
Yep.
You're going to absolutely play that matchup. And then Broncos DST, absolutely, yes, it's a rookie quarterback. Not a rookie quarterback, but a quarterback that's making, I believe, his first NFL start.
All right.
On to the Bengals. For Driscoll, it's just an okay matchup. So just don't do it. Don't get cute.
Please don't.
Yeah, please don't. Joe Mixon, he's a week-to-week flex play. He's a flex play in this one, I guess.
Is what you're trying to say?
Is what I'm trying to say. There's no way you're bitching him at this point. Even in a bad matchup with a first-time starter, I think that Denver's going to key on Joe Mixon a little bit in this one, which is why he's faded maybe a little hard for me. But I don't see a scenario. He gives you a decent floor anymore, so I don't see a scenario where you're not starting him.
I can see a lot of pass catching work, but a low yards per carry, as he should see some sack boxes in this game.
That too, and that's why he has floor. So flex was the wrong term for it, but you get it. He's kind of fading.
We get it.
Yeah. Adrian Green will be back and healthy. Tyler Boyd will be playing. I don't know how you said either of them this week. Boyd's a mid-wide receiver two to me, as he did perform with Driscoll at the end of the game last week. Denver's allowing 28.5 fantasy points to the wide receiver over their last 5 games. That bodes well for both AJ Green and Tyler Boyd, or at least the potential to bode well for both of them. So you got to make plays based on potential. As for CJ Uzomah, he's a screamer like most weeks. 12 targets last week was a season high, but he does see work regardless. It's a young, inexperienced quarterback throwing the ball, and Denver's just league average against the tight end. So he could end up in a safety net role.
All right. Anything else to add on that game?
No, most Bengals are fringe starts to me, honestly, not named Jeff Driscoll.
And I'm assuming Denver's defense is a good start.
Yeah, I mentioned Denver's defense.
He did. Fantastic start.
I did mention Denver's defense.
All right. Let's move on to Ravens v. Falcons then, where the Falcons are favored by 1 at home. It's a 48-point over-under. Starting with the Ravens, mentioned in Wednesday's episode, Lamar Jackson is my start of the week. He's had 70-plus rushing yards in both starts this season, and the Falcons are giving up an average of 285 yards and 2.5 touchdowns a game to opposing quarterbacks. So Jackson is a back-end QB1. Some names I would start him over this week: Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford.
A hot take there, sir. I like it.
They all have real ugly matchups, and or Carson Wentz just sucks right now.
Yeah.
Falcons are allowing just under 100 yards a game rushing, 10 rushing touchdowns in 11 games. So if Edwards is good to go, he will be an RB2 this week. He's had over 40 touches over the last 2 weeks, probably why his ankle's bothering him. More interesting wrinkle, though, is Ty Montgomery is likely the primary receiving back. Falcons are giving up an average of 8 receptions and 63 yards a game to opposing running backs. Gus Edwards has just 1 target on the year, so I don't expect him to get a ton of that work.
Are we concerned with Dixon if Dixon's play? Because that's his strength is in the pass catching game.
That does throw a wrinkle on things, so keep an eye on that. If no Dixon, though, most of that work should be Montgomery's, and he's an interesting PPR desperation play. Falcons are much better against wide receivers as of late, with rushing quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends being more of the issue for their defense. With Jackson throwing the ball, I'm benching all 3 receivers. If I have to start one, it's Brown, who can make his fantasy day on 1 play, but I don't trust consistent production for any of them.
No.
Tight end's a mess. You stay far, far away from it. The only starters I'm looking at is Gus Bus, possibly Montgomery, and Lamar Jackson. And defense is actually an avoid here as well. They're on the road. It's a top 10-ish offense, and they haven't been quite as productive outside of the Raiders game, which was a easy matchup for them.
Yeah, I've dropped them in plenty of leagues.
Yep. Onto the Falcons side, where the last 4 good quarterbacks to play the Ravens, which is Breeze, Cam, Ben, and Dalton, have averaged 228 yards and 2.5 touchdowns against the Ravens. So I actually don't hate this spot for Ryan. He should easily be able to get 228 yards because his average game is 335. And he scored 2+ touchdowns in 7 of his 11 games this season. So I like him as a low QB1, just behind Jackson. Coleman and Ito Smith are both benches this week, ideally. Ravens are allowing just 3.5 yards per carry, 28 total receiving yards per game to opposing running backs, and 7 total running back touchdowns. Coleman's the only one you're considering of the 2, and if you must start him, he's a low running back 3. Yeah. Julio's 100+ yards in 6 straight games. He scored a touchdown 3 of his last 4, so even though the Ravens have been a buzzsaw of a defense, you're still starting Julio as a top 12 play. His 100-yard streak could end, though, because no receivers had 100 yards against the Ravens. Also, as a note, Julio's on pace for 1,900 yards this year.
I'm not shocked.
Holy shit.
And like 5 touchdowns.
Yep. But 1,900 yards is still crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Ridley and Sanu are both benched. If I'm considering one, it's Ridley as a low wide receiver 3.
Yeah. Don't like him.
I don't either. The Ravens, though, awful against tight ends lately. 4 touchdowns in the position in the last 5 games. They're giving up an average of 6 receptions and 53 yards to the position each game. So Hooper, outside of Julio, is going to be the only show in town. He should get the majority of the production for himself as a low tight end 1. There are no other tight ends to really take work from him. And as for the defense, evil laugh. Just,
I could see a boom bust scenario for them.
Their
Jackson,
defense is bad.
I know. He's taking a lot of sacks, and I think he's had 3 interceptions, a couple of fumbles. So
yeah, that's not a trapdoor defense. That's a sinkhole.
You're hoping to float on quicksand.
Please save me.
All right, one last game before we hit the beer review break, and that is Rams versus Lions. Rams favored by 10. I think it should be higher, even though it's on the road. 55.5 point over under.
Here's a fun kicker question for us before we start: Zerline or Tucker this week? I'm gonna field it. In Tuck we trust against a depleted Atlanta defense. There could be chances where the Jackson stalls the offense. Tucker had a good game against a bad defense in Oakland, so
I take no man over Zerline.
I know. They're fun though. Anyways, moving on to the Rams-Lions game. Lions are giving up 24 passing touchdowns this season, just 4 interceptions. So Goff is a great play this week, coming off of his incredible performance against the Chiefs. He's thrown multi-touchdowns in every game since Week 7. He's averaging over 324 passing yards per game during that 5-game span. He's a lock and loaded mid to high QB1 this week. Gurley is a no-question auto start. McVay says you should be perfectly fine to go. The question is who's going to get the Slade treatment, and honestly, it may not even matter. Cooks has generally seen the most DB1 coverage, the most top corner in coverage, but he's gone for over 100 yards in his past 3 games. While the 100-yard games haven't been there for Woods over his past 5 games, he's averaging 76 receiving yards on 4.6 catches and nearly 8 targets. The floor is there for Woods. The upside is there for the volume and this high-powered offense. And after a 6 receptions for 80 yards and 2 touchdown game, Josh Reynolds has a nice flex value this week against a bad Detroit secondary. And of course, I know you went with Gerald Everett start of the week here. I'm a little, I'm not as high on starting any tight end this week.
He's not in my top 12, but it was a deep play.
And I like that call if you're looking for a touchdown upside. After a nice 2-game stretch, or after a nice 2-game touchdown from him, and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games, Higbee outsnapped him. I think it was 76 to 27% though. So it's all he has to get the volume in this. And I don't know if there's going to be enough for him there. The Lions' offense hasn't been much of anything since the Tate trade in with Marvin Jones and IR. And Johnson probably and looking not to play this week. The Rams' defense isn't a terrible play at all. They can force Stafford into having to throw more. Even though he's only taken 3 sacks his past 2 weeks, against the Vikings and Bears in weeks 9 and 10, he took 16. He's also had 4 interceptions over his past 3 games, so it gives the Rams defense a nice floor, and even with some upside of this week. And if they get Talib back, he's back, right? Is he playing this game?
Talib has been activated and is expected to play.
Okay, even better. As for the Lions, and speaking of Stafford, I'm not streaming him this week. 3 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions over his past 3 games. The Rams have a great pass rush, and it's going to be ugly for him. If anything, you're praying for garbage time. With Kerryon Johnson not playing, I'm not playing blunt against what could possibly, or what could and likely looks to be a terrible game script game for him. And Riddick's got floor though too, which is why I like him as a flex if you need him in a deepish league. From since week 9, Riddick's averaging 7 targets, 6 receptions on those for 44 yards. Consider him a flex play just based on floor. Since the Marvin Jones injury, Golladay has seen 23 targets. He's a wide receiver too in this matchup, even though with Talib back, he's gonna get volume to at least get him there. And even has some wide receiver 1 upside in PPR leagues, just give him the amount of volume there. And because Marcus Peters is trash. Bruce Ellington could be a thing if he can stay healthy. It's 16 targets since the Jones injury, 6 catches in both of those games. Doesn't get you a lot of yards or touchdown upside, but at least he gives you the floor in PPR leagues. Never play Lions tight end and never play their defense unless you're playing in negative leagues. That's it.
Beer review.
All right, Dan, what did you think of Hopper's favorite beer ever, Sanctimonious IPA by Stone?
I think it's a fantastic IPA. You get the nice start, the nice crisp start on the front end. It finishes dry. You get the traditional, just that traditional IPA finish to it. The bitterness isn't overpowering, so even people who don't traditionally like bittered beers could actually drink this. Stone did a fantastic job with this.
Yep.
I wanted to keep it sweet and simple.
Dan or Hopper?
Kind of similar. It starts off really crisp, and then you fade into kind of a citrusy, but with a little bit of piney in there as well. Hoppiness. And then it's like somebody rips the Band-Aid off, and there's just a quick shot of bitterness that lingers a little bit semi-dry on the finish. It's a very, very good IPA.
Yep, fantastic. No real frills to it. There's nothing super fancy.
They don't get cute. It's just a
no
good traditional
no weird
West
flavors. It's just a two hops. You can get the 2 different kind of distinct hop flavors going on with it. Starts bright, ends kind of dry, hoppy. So if you're looking just for a real solid IPA, fantastic kind of hop series, and it's just all about the hops.
If you like West Coast IPAs, you're going to absolutely love this.
Very much so. All right, anything else to add?
Nope. Yeah, everything should always be all about the hop.
Hopper approves. All right.
What 2-piece?
Thank you, Sanctimonious. Or Stone for Sanctimonious, I guess. Moving on. Chiefs Raiders up next. Chiefs favored by 15. I think that might go down slightly with no Hunt, but it should probably not change much. 55.5 point over under for the Chiefs side. Mahomes is my QB2 this week. Faces a Raiders defense that is surprising competent in QBs this season. So it's not as juicy as a matchup as I expected before I deep dove the numbers, but he's still obviously an A-grade play. On to the running game, though, where the Raiders have allowed 100-plus total yards in 4 of their last 5 games to opposing running back. Not to the team, to a running back. So Ware should have a solid game. And he's not a top 3 play, but he is a top 12 play this week.
And this is telling about how games go at the Raiders. The numbers aren't really gaudy for Mahomes, but look great for the running back.
Yep. They're pretty much dead on league average against the passing game, but teams get up and they just run on
I
them.
can see the Chiefs.
That's exactly it. That's what I was getting
I
at.
can see the Chiefs just throwing a shit ton without Hunt playing too.
They could, but I expect we're to see a lot of checkdowns or
Yep.
drop-offs or design passes.
Exactly.
Raiders' pass defense has been competent against wide receivers, allowing just 145 yards per game, but Hill is still a must-start. More of a mid-wide receiver 1 than a top 3 play like he is most weeks. Watkins can go, which he can't. He'd be a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3, so instead, place Conley as a low wide receiver 3 in his place.
Yep.
Good tight ends absolutely dunk on the Raiders, though. Doyle, Ebron, and Kittle all have scored on them in the last couple weeks. They allow 63 yards per game in the position. Kelsey is my tight end 1.
You're not going to sit Kelsey anyways.
I'm raising expectations for this one. Chiefs have been a solid defense the last couple weeks. Eric Berry might be back. Fortunately, he's not. Raiders are terrible. Top 5 play.
Why would you tease me like that with the Barry news?
It's good news for Cook.
It does help Cook, which I'll get to in a moment. To the Raiders side, Carr has 13 touchdowns on the season and only 3 in his last 4 games.
Garbage.
Even in 2 quarterback leagues, you cannot start him. The running back... Oh, go ahead, Hopper.
I was just going to say, in contrast, Big Ben has one more in just his home games.
Yep. Running back is actually an interesting play, though. Chiefs are bottom in the league against opposing backfields. Actually, second worst. I believe the Bengals are the worst.
Yep.
173 total yards per game, 15 total touchdowns in the season so far. Currently second worst in the NFL. Martin and Richard are both RB3 plays this week. Richard more of PPR play, Martin more of a standard play.
Yep.
Chiefs are an above-average pass defense. They've been trending upward all season, especially against wide receivers. The only pass catcher you're considering is Cook. With no Barry, he is a top 10 play this week. He should. Hopefully, they see a lot of volume. For the defense, are you fucking crazy, mate?
They don't even have a defense. Their defense is on IR. It's done for the season.
I want to see somebody do it and then still win their game.
That would be like I think I'm going to beat you so badly that I can start the Raiders' defense against you.
Just get cocky, though. This isn't the time of the season to get cocky.
That is the
If you have a first-round bye locked up already and you're like the number 1 seed and it's locked and ready to go, I want to see a screenshot
That
of
is
that.
the ultimate BM move. That's the ultimate.
That is
BM
super
move.
bad manners.
I love it.
All right, Hopper, continuing the bad manners, we got a 49ers versus Seahawks showdown. Seahawks favored by 10 at home, 46 over under. How many people from the 49ers can we actually start in this game?
Well, not Nick Mullins. He's a backup and he's been playing like one. The Seattle defense is above average against quarterback. Is an above average defense. There's no reason to get cute. Don't get cute. It's becoming a show model.
Yes.
Yep.
Matt Breida, he's performed reasonably well, but against Detroit, Kansas City, Arizona, Green Bay, and the Giants, and Tampa Bay. He struggled, though, against Oakland, Arizona, the Chargers, and Minnesota. 2 of those make sense. 2 of those don't make sense. Meanwhile, Seattle's been shredded in recent weeks, though, by CMC, Jones, Gurley, and Gordon, all 18-plus points. So to me, this is an above-average matchup that should pay off with running back 2 numbers, and he always has the potential for a touchdown. Even though he's been a little bit unpredictable based on when he's performed and when he hasn't, this one looks good.
Well, the explanation for the Oakland-Arizona game, I believe he was playing through an injury.
He's always banged up, though.
Well, he's off the injury report right now. They said he's feeling good.
For now.
As for the pass defense, Seattle's pass defense has been suspect to speed guys over the last 5 weeks. Marvin Jones, Keenan Allen, who's lesser of speed guys, still quick though. Brandon Cooks, Devontae Adams, Curtis Samuel, all 10-plus point days, while DJ Moore was also very, very productive. You know that Moore has good speed. And most of those games were not touchdown dependent. So Goodwin's a game-time decision, but to me, Pettis should be considered a wide receiver 3 this week because those are the types of receivers that are putting up 10-plus against Seattle. You're not going to get a wide receiver one day, so make sure your expectations are set. But if you're looking for a flex play, Dante Pettis is not a bad one.
It worked last week. It might work again.
I think it probably will.
And Goodwin is not a game-time decision. He's out.
He's done. Yeah, he was a game-time decision when I wrote that note.
Yep.
And then Kittle is always a must-start.
Yep.
So
my tight end 4 this week.
Yep, Seattle is going to be really quick because the 49ers defense is neutral. I mean, they're average at everything, not great at anything. They're very, very much just kind of vanilla in that vacuum where it's like, okay, you're going to get what you expect out of a player in a neutral matchup. That being said, you're starting Russell Wilson, you're starting Tyler Lockett, David Moore's a boom bust play. Chris Carson's your safest running back. I'm not buying into the Rashad Penny hype that came up. They're going to get more touches. And Nick Vanette's an emergency only play.
Baldwin?
Baldwin, wide receiver 3, flex consideration. I don't trust him.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why I didn't list him, is because I don't trust him. He is the third wide receiver that I would look at starting because he hasn't performed well enough.
All right. Up next, Vikings traveling to New England to play the Patriots. Patriots favored by 5.5, 48.5 point over under. Should be some interesting starts and sits in this matchup.
Yeah, Cousins is a fine QB start this week. Turnover issue for him has reared its ugly head, and Patriots have excelled at that same at this, not attacking that 12 interceptions on the season, tied for the fourth most. Cousins has been a better QB on the road this season than at home. He's averaging 330 passing yards per game on the road. He's throwing 12 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions, and he's only taken 10 sacks. This is in 5 road games. He may not get a top 3 to 5 grade for most people, but I like him as a mid QB1 with high upside in a game that could feature a little more passing than we expect. But there's an area of weakness for the Patriots, and that's been pass catching backs. Problem is Cooks and Murray, I've kind of seen some equal snaps. Murray's had over 40% snaps in 2 of the 3 games as Cooks has been back. The only game he didn't was against the Bears, where Cooks had the majority of the pass catching work, which is why I like Cook this week as an RB2 play. The Patriots haven't allowed a lot of touchdowns to running backs, so you don't expect a lot of touchdown upside, but you got to go in against the Packers, and I expect them to get more involved. As this is another must-win, or at least it needs to be a competitive game for the Vikings. They want to keep this playoff train rolling. As for Diggs and Thielen, this is before I knew about the Diggs news, so I do consider them both auto starts. We got to wait and hear more about the Diggs injury, but both have top 5 wide receiver upsides on any given week. If Diggs is out, especially, if Thielen could be your wide receiver 1 this week. Rudolph saw an uptick in production against the Packers last week. Hasn't found the end zone since week 3, and the volume really hasn't been consistent. But just like Cook, the Vikings will need him to step up, especially if Diggs is in the play. And the Patriots are a good matchup to give up the 5th most points to tight ends per game this season, including the 3rd most touchdowns at 7. And I expect Rudolph to end this touchdown-less streak and get a touchdown this game. The defense has been good lately, and the Patriots are banged up. It's a bit of a trap game as Patriots are a lot better on the road this year than they are, or a lot better at home than on the road this year. They're averaging 35.4 points per game at home this season compared to just 21.6 on the road. So play the Vikings defense at your own risk as well. As for the Patriots, like most QBs, Brady is better at home than on the road. He's averaging over 300 yards passing compared to just 250 on the road. The Vikings are a very good defense against quarterbacks, so they're giving up the 6th fewest points per game, and they've only given up 14 passing touchdowns compared to just 10 interceptions, including 221 passing yards per game, which is the 5th fewest. Brady's the low QB1, high QB2 for me this week. For running back, with Burkhead back in the mix, his backfield is a bit crowded again. The Vikings are also great against the run, allowing only 3.7 yards per carry and 93.6 rushing yards per game, and a league low 3 rushing touchdowns with just 6 total running back touchdowns. Michelle was my sit of the week. James White was Hopper's sit of the week. I'm not really trusting anybody. Michelle has the touchdown upside, and White has the safest floor. If you have to play any of them, that's kind of where you lie, but don't expect big numbers from anybody. As for the receivers, Edelman gets the floor, Gordon gets the big play, but none are really appealing as flex options for me. Before the Jets game, Edelman was averaging over 10 targets per game in a 3-game stretch, including 2 9-catch games and 2 games over 100 yards. So there is some decent floor to him if you play him, especially if Rose isn't to play. I expect it to be Mackenzie Alexander to see more Edelman. So there is a good wide receiver up for him this week. Gordon, on the other hand, though, bit boom bust. He's had 1 double-digit target game, and it's got only 2 touchdowns since joining the Patriots. But he's had 70-plus receiving yards over his past 3 games, so that's where the boom bust lies. Gronk finally had a nice game against the Jets, and he scored for the first time since week 1, but the Vikings have been great against tight ends as of late. No touchdowns allowed and under 100 total yards allowed to tight ends over the past 3 games. But it's really, really difficult to sit Gronk, even given the bad matchup. Yeah. And the defense could be boom bust. They're fourth in interceptions this year, and Cousins is prone to throwing turnovers, throwing interceptions, and then obviously with the fumbles. But he's only taken five sacks over his past 3 games, and that's sad.
All right. Let's go ahead and get to my Y game. We got Jets going into Tennessee to play the Titans. Titans are favored by 7.5, 40.5 point over under. This game, I'm taking Titans to cover this game. Darnold should be back this week, in quotes. He's not startable against a top 10 passing defense in Tennessee, though. Run game is one of the few angles you may find a fantasy start out of this game, though. It's not pretty. If I'm betting on one, it's Crowell, who's either out-touched or tied McGuire for touches in every game since McGuire returned. I'm betting on Crowell as a mid-running back 3. McGuire's more of a floor running back 4. Titans' run defense has been more suspect the last few weeks compared to the beginning of the season, so this is a neutral to slightly below neutral matchup. I don't love starting Crowell, but there's a league or two where I'm considering it. He's probably about my running back 33 to 36 range. Wide receiver is the one spot where you can really exploit the Titans. I don't mind Enunwa here, who's led the team in yards in 2 of the last 3 games since he came back from his injury. And before Darnold got hurt, Enunwa was his favorite target. He's a low wide receiver play in PPR leagues. Curse is the only one you'd consider as a high-volume wide receiver 4. Herndon was my sit of the week. Titans have allowed 35 yards per game to the tight end position, 0 touchdowns on the season. I do not want to start Chris Herndon if I can help it. And then the defense is in the hell nah category. For the Titans, Mariota had 228 plus yards and 2 touchdowns or more in 3 of his last 4 matchups. He did miss it in the Colts game he got hurt in. Jets are basically a neutral matchup. They've allowed 220 plus yards and 2 plus touchdowns in 7 of their last 8 games. So not a ton of teams haven't done a lot of ceiling work on them, but most guys get a pretty solid floor. So he's a very solid streamer if you need a safe play. Where teams make their money, though, is running backs. Lewis is an RB2 this week, and even the often hated Henry by Beerfield Fantasy Football can be started as an RB3 this week. This is a bottom 5 run defense. Awesome matchup, and I expect the Titans to lean on the running game.
Ugh, gross.
Hey, if the matchup's there, you roll with it. Wide receivers are a better play than tight ends against the Jets. Jets are average against wide receivers, top 5 against tight ends. Davis is the one guy I'm kind of looking at. He's an upside wide receiver 3, probably around my wide receiver 25 to 28 range.
I forgot my wide end at the start of the week.
Your wide end?
Yeah, my wide end at the start of the week.
One positive note, though, for Davis, he has scored or top 90 yards in 2 of his last 3 games. Sharp, Jonnu, and Taywan Taylor are all on the bench for being too unreliable / this being a tough matchup for tight ends.
Jonnu.
Defense is a top 5 play this week at home against the struggling Jets offense, and I hope you guys all stash the Titans everywhere. Their schedule is so good for the playoffs.
Cake.
That's all I got on that game. Chargers versus the Steelers for our Sunday night matchup. Steelers favored by 3.5. It's a 51.5 point over under. Hopper, who are we playing out of this game?
All right. Well, Phillip Rivers, you're absolutely going to play him. Obviously, we're starting with the Chargers here. No quarterback against the Steelers has topped 16 points since week 5, but most are right around that 15-point mark, 14 to 15 point whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, Rivers has tossed multiple touchdowns in every game this season. He's got 0 games below 200 yards. He's a very safe play, even against the improved Pittsburgh pass defense.
Agreed.
As for the running game, Eckler should see the bulk of the work of this one with Justin Jackson sprinkled in. Pitt's run defense has been not great over the last 3 weeks. They've given up decent days to Phillip Lindsay, 17 points, Leonard Fournette, 20, Christian McCaffrey, 31. There's also a very specific type of running back that they have not been good against. Kareem Hunt, 14 points. Joe Mixon, 14 points. Alex Collins just below the double-digit mark at 9.9. And then McCaffrey, Lindsay. They're all guys that can work inside, outside. They're quicker guys. Austin Eckler fits that mold. He's a running back 2 for me. And then Jackson, kind of a desperate heat, but that's why earlier in the show I said I like Eckler this week. When you look at the backs that have performed against Pittsburgh, Eckler fits that mold.
Mm-hmm.
As for the wide receivers, Pittsburgh's strong against wide receivers. So Keenan Allen out of the slot, that's the only one I want to start. They've even have just 2 touchdowns and 1 game over 60 yards over the last 5 weeks. That was to Emmanuel Sanders. Allen, I think, is the only way to attack them. touchdown numbers are low, so I don't like Mike Williams, even with Tyrell Williams not there. And pay no mind to the tight ends in this one. Steer clear of the defense with Pittsburgh at home. On to the Steelers. With Big Ben, you're absolutely starting him, but it's not a fantastic matchup. Chargers haven't given up 20 to a quarterback since Jared Goff in week 3, and Ben's actually throwing for 50 yards less a game at home. Granted, a much better touchdown interception numbers, but still, just kind of temper expectations for both quarterbacks.
Yeah,
Could be a shootout, though, too.
Yeah, the home road splits for Ben have not been as drastic this year.
Yep.
No, they have not been. As for James Conner, he's got an average matchup in this one. The Chargers have given up a rush touchdown in each of the last 3 weeks, just not a ton of yardage. They're right at 4 yards a carry, and they aren't giving up a lot in the receiving game, but he should be a solid running back 1, not in that mid, kind of low running back 1 range. As for Juju and Brown, they should both be faded this week. No wide receivers over 10 points in the last 5 games against the Chargers. They've given up just 3 touchdowns to wide receivers since week 5, only 1 100-yard wide receiver in that span. So even though both guys have the potential to boom, I don't think you sit either one of them. You may want to put a little bit more upside in your lineup. As for the tight ends, have we heard anything on Vance McDonald's hip injury? Is he going?
I think I may have missed him today. Let me double check really quick. Go ahead and talk about the matchup in general while I pull that up.
Anyway, just the matchup in general, because if McDonald goes, this is for him. If not, it's Jesse James. They're solid tight end streamers. Vinette, Kittle, Njoku, and Cook, the only tight ends to see a ton of volume against the Chargers, they've all been over 50 yards. So I know they have growing games, but tight ends have been able to at least give you some yardage and some solid floor. So if you're looking for somebody, whichever of those 2 starts is the way you'd want to go there.
And McDonald returned to a full practice on Thursday. That's why I didn't see it today.
Gotcha. So McDonald will play. So Vance McDonald is a solid stream this week.
All right, that all you got?
That's all I got. Let's bring it home. Redskins, Eagles. Eagles favored by 6.5. 44.0 over-under. Nick, this is yours.
Yep, let's go to Monday night, where Colt McCoy is actually not a bad streamer this week. He managed 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 28 rushing yards against a much better Cowboys defense last night. Wish I could have gotten that out of Drew Brees. Also threw 3 picks, but I'm going to roll with it. Now gets an Eagles defense that has 1 interception in their last 5 games, is allowing an average of 299 yards and 2 touchdowns per game. I love him as a QB2 in 2 quarterback leagues, and if you are in a situation where you're just screwed at quarterback and 1 QB, I may even consider it. Eagles were the #1 run defense through the first 5 weeks, and then they played Saquon Barkley in week 6, who apparently broke them. They're now allowing 108 rushing yards per game, 65 yards receiving, and 8 total touchdowns over those 6. Peterson has looked rough lately, but I like him as a high running back 3 because the Eagles have been struggling so much, and with Chris Thompson back, he's an upside PPR play as a running back 3. Pass-catching backs have absolutely killed the Eagles this year. So Chris Thompson is back. If you're desperate, you can shove him right back in your lineup.
Some minor breaking news, by the way. The NFL has officially begun an investigation into the Kareem Hunt stuff, too, which is usually the successor to being put on that commissioner's list.
I assumed they wouldn't have authorized him being on the commissioner's list without the investigation.
Yeah.
I would also, but it's official. It seems like that's moving quick, too.
Oh, yeah. Which is good.
They gotta get out in front of this.
Yep.
In 2 games with Colt McCoy, Doxson has seen 17 targets, and he's facing an Eagles defense that has allowed 75-plus yards to the receiver with the most targets in 3 straight games. I like him as a wide receiver 4 with some upside if you're desperate. If you're in full PPR leagues, I'm also interested in Trey Quinn and for those deep formats because he should see at least 6 targets. Eagles secondary is plain bad and beat up everywhere. Eagles are much better against tight ends than receivers, though, mainly because teams just don't bother throwing to tight ends when the wide receivers are that open. So if you can, I would try to avoid Reed. You may be stuck with him, but if you can try to get somebody like Cooper or Rudolph in your lineup, I would take either one of them over Jordan Reed this week. And as for the defense, Redskins' defense is an okay play. There's so many good streaming options. You can probably do better, but their defense gets enough sacks, creates enough turnovers that they're generally an okay start. On to the Eagles side, where Wentz is just not startable right now, as he's bombed the last 2 games with a combined 16 fantasy points. I want a prove-it game from Wentz before I even consider him. If you're in 2 quarterback, you probably don't have 2 quarterbacks you can start over him, but it's been bad. The only person I'm really excited to start besides the obvious Zach Ertz is Josh Adams. The vaunted Redskins run defense from the beginning of the year has been trending the wrong way since week 8. Coincidence, also won against Saquon Barkley.
He's saying is that Barkley breaks defenses.
Yes, he does.
Yep.
Since that game, they're allowing 103 rushing yards, 60 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns over those 5 games. Adams has seen 32 of 44 running back touches over the last 2 weeks. He should be started as a mid-running back too. The only other one seeing touches was Clement. He's a desperation RB4 and probably an RB5 now that Sproles is back. I hate the Eagles receivers so very much. Since Golden Tate's joined the team, he's seen the most targets at 20, 97 total yards on 20 targets. So he's not startable.
That's really bad.
Jeffrey
That's
hasn't topped
terrible.
50 yards since week 7. Aguilar has
Screwing around with Tate.
Aguilar has 12 total yards in the last 2 weeks.
Tate.
Woo!
On top of it, no Eagles receiver has scored a touchdown since week 7.
Ertz.
Ertz.
So with the Eagles, with the Redskins secondary being their weakness, Jeffrey and Tate are very, 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 very low wide receiver threes. Like they're probably literally my wide receiver 35 and 36. I would look elsewhere for options. I don't trust either of them, but the volume should theoretically be there.
In theory.
Ertz is a monster, though. 10-plus fantasy points in 8 of 11 games, and even though this is a tougher matchup, Redskins are top 5 against the position. He's still a must-start. He's still my tight end, too, this
Still
week.
Zach Ertz. You're not sitting him.
Eagles' defense has been bad, but it's McCoy. He's turnover-prone. I still can't endorse it, though.
You right over there?
There's too many good matchups.
Like you're so choked up.
I've just got hiccups combined with trying to talk.
How about Colt McCoy?
All right. That's all we got. Anything else we need to add before we continue? Any more breaking news?
Yes. One question, Jimmy. Carson Wentz or Lamar Jackson? I guess full PPR. We'll let Hopper answer this.
I would lean. I'm gonna. Yeah. I want to say Wentz really bad, but I think I'm gonna lean Jackson just given the way Wentz has performed here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna side with Nick saying he's not startable. I want to see it first. I think Jackson at least gives you a solid rushing floor.
We haven't put anybody in timeout in a while. Wentz is in timeout.
I love how you call
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson Hugh Jackson.
All right.
Hugh Jackson is the answer.
All right. Let's put a bow on those 15 games. You can catch us live 10:30 in the morning on Sunday. YouTube. That is Central Time. We'll answer all your questions, get you ready for the week. Make sure you guys are all set and ready to go. Tweet at us at BeerfieldFF if you have any questions for us. You can also find us there on Instagram for our beer art, Untapped for our reviews. We appreciate all the support, guys. If you guys want to reach out and do any additional support, DM us at BeerfieldFF or email at beerfieldfantasy@gmail.com if you want to know how else you can help support the show. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for being understanding, keeping those mostly to one or another type pick. I'm at Nick Sparks. We've got Christopher Hopper down in St. Louis.
Hot BFF with 2 P's. Catch you all Sunday morning, I hope.
Dan Third, am I right?
And Theory BFF with 2 Fs.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. Good luck in Week 13. Make those playoffs. Win a fantasy championship. We'll catch you guys next time on Beerfield Fantasy Football.
See ya.
Peace. Later.